Artillery played a key role during the First World War, and especially in the Canadian Corps fighting on the Western Front. The artillery in the battles of 1917 and 1918 often fired million shells before an attack, during and after. An incredible number, the weight of shell fire to clear barbed wire, to crush enemy defenses, and by 17 and 18 engaging in counter-battery role in knocking out enemy gunners so they could not harass the Canadian soldiers advancing. And so these guns, both the heavy siege guns and the lighter field guns, are absolutely crucial. This is an 18-pounder field gun here. It was the most common field gun used by the British and the Canadian and the Australian forces. They are crucial for the battlefield because they're light artillery. They weigh several tons and they're pulled by horses, but nonetheless they're considered light, and they are both involved in the initial bombardment, but then in the follow-on, the attacking forces moving forward, they need the support of their guns. And by 1918, and especially during the 100 Days campaign, the series of battles, the Canadian fight from the Battle of Amiens on the 8th of August through Arras, the capture of Cambrai, ultimately the capture of Mons, guns like this would have been supporting the infantry in the field, being moved forward during the course of the battle, often stopping, setting up and firing a number of rounds and then moving off again. And so this is very much a mobile strike force. The 100 Days campaign ends the First World War. These are the series of battles that break the German army in the field. They come at the end of 4 long years of war, 4 long years of stalemate. That's the war I think we have in our mind, the war of the trenches, the unending shell fire, the chemical agents, the snipers, the troglodyte existence of the soldiers as they lived beneath the earth, suffering with dirt, deprivation, lice and rats. But 1918 is a very different type of fighting. In fact, the Germans open up the battlefield on the 21st of March when they launched their March offensive. They crash forward behind heavy artillery, shell fire, bombardments, chemical agents, with specially trained attack forces to attack and move around areas of resistance. And they advance dozens of kilometers in the first week of battle. And it's quite shocking to the Allies. The stalemate of the front has been blown open. They eventually recover, though, and the Germans suffered about 800,000 casualties in about 4 months of battle. And then the Allies counterattacked. And it was the Canadian Corps with the Australians who would spearhead that assault at the Battle of Amiens. That itself was a shocking defeat for the Germans, and the Allies with the Canadian Corps at the sharp end continued to drive the Germans back until they were finally defeated on the November 11th, 1918. The Canadian Corps were long regarded as shock troops. They had achieved victory at Vimy in April of 1917. They had captured Hill 70 in August of 1917. They had again, despite horrific conditions at Passchendaele, overrun the German positions there and captured the ridge. But it's the 100 Days, I think, that make the reputation of the Canadian Corps. 100,000 strong, led by Sir Arthur Currie, Canadian-born commander. They deliver victory after victory, and it's important to note, of course, that these victories came at a terrible cost. More than 45,000 casualties in the course of the 100 Days. And so there is a mixed legacy there, one of considerable victory for the Canadians, where they were acknowledged by the Germans and the British and other Allied forces as being shock troops. But of course, shock troops suffer heavy casualties because they're thrown into battle after battle. And I think in the end, if we talk about the reputation of the Canadian Corps, we have to say that it's the 100 Days that makes the reputation of the Canadians being fierce, dependable, and an elite combat unit. Mons was a symbolic town, an important town, and the Canadians were ordered to capture it on the 10th of November. Sir Arthur Currie worried about sending his forces off to capture Mons. He knew the war was coming to an end. The rumors were circulating, but no one knew for certain. And in fact, he was not told about it by telegram until 6 a.m. on November 11th, when in fact the Canadians were in Mons. The Canadians wanted to capture Mons, though. It was an important town. It's where the British Army started its retreat in August of 1914, and it was fitting that the Canadians, who had played such a key role in the 100 Days, should capture Mons. After the war, however, Currie was accused of having wantonly sent his soldiers forward to be gunned down for his own glory in the capture of Mons. That was untrue, but the charge was made by Sir Sam Hughes, the former Minister of Militia in the House of Commons. And those charges stuck, and they stuck for a number of reasons. I think primarily it was the losses of the 100 Days, the 45,000 casualties. Canadians could not understand the great victories at Amiens or Arras, and that they came with 12,000 or 13,000 casualties. And of course, on the Western Front, even when one was winning, you were always suffering horrendous casualties. To finish the story there, Currie, who later became Principal of McGill, fought a high-profile court case in Cobourg, Ontario in 1928 to restore his reputation. He won, but the trial itself, which really refought the war and the final days of the war, broke him. Physically, he had a stroke, never recovered, and he died in 1933. And at his funeral in Montreal, they say it was the largest funeral to that point in history. I think very much his reputation was restored at that point. But Currie was never greeted as the hero that other generals like him received in other countries.